was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie, please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. Today we'll be doing something a bit different than usual. We'll be taking peace in another direction. Usually we speak about Israelis and Palestinians who work on peace together. Today we'll be speaking about issues a little closer to home. We'll be talking about peace and friendship between interfaith communities, the recent uptick in anti-Semitism and islamophobia, and helping the needy in our neighborhoods. We've been blessed with so much. And as this year comes to a close, I wanted to stop, take a moment to be grateful, and think of others who are less fortunate. We'll be taking some time to think about the state of our communities today and what gives or doesn't give us peace of mind. With all of today's resources in the world, having people that go hungry has always upset me. In the U.S., I feel it's unconscionable. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, unemployment and food insecurity soared. In 2021 in America, 53 million people turned to food banks and community programs for help putting food on the table. This problem is not new. COVID didn't create this problem. It just made it so much worse. I remember when my son was 5, he came home on Earth Day and told me he wanted to save the world. As a mom, I thought, how could I encourage him with these thoughts? So we began a project we called the Kindergarten Kindness Project. We recycled bottles and cans, and the money went to Second Harvest of Orange County. This kindergarten kindness picture is from 2005. The kindergartners went from classroom to classroom explaining why we needed to recycle and give the money to Second Harvest. Oh, these cutie pies. By the time my son graduated high school, he had helped feed 18,000 meals. I bring up this project because I wanted to show this isn't a new problem and that even our young kids can do something to help, and the lessons they learn will last them a lifetime. Please ask yourself what you and your family can do to help, and then do it. This year, I again attended our 2022 annual Interfaith Thanksgiving event, where yearly our synagogue, Temple Bethel of South Orange County, gets together with the Orange County Islamic Foundation and Shepherd of the Hills Methodist Church, and we bring impact food supplies for 240 needy families for a Thanksgiving dinner, as well as other food and grocery gift cards. The food is then given to an organization called Families Forward, a nonprofit that feeds struggling families and helps those who end up homeless in Orange County find a roof over their heads. I know many of us who live in Orange County think of it as an affluent community, and for some that is true. However, the fact is that before the pandemic slammed Orange County with job losses in our once thriving travel, tourism, and hospitality industries, there were nearly 456,000 people at risk of hunger each month. As of June 2020, that number has increased by 4 times as many per month. This population consists of families, children, seniors, the newly vulnerable impacted by COVID-19 job losses, and those recovering from medical expenses or disabilities. We may think of the homeless as mentally ill people we see in tents living under the freeway, but in fact, many are working families struggling to get by. In Orange County, at minimum wage, a wage earner must work 131 hours per week to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. The math just doesn't add up. 14.2% of Orange County's children are living in poverty. So let's begin. Rabbi Kavod Weider is the rabbi for Temple Beth El of South Orange County, California. He is a native of Orange County. Kavod received his BA in psychology from UC Santa Cruz in 1993 and his MA in transpersonal psychology or counseling from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in 1996. He received an MA in Jewish Studies from the American Jewish University and was ordained at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in 2012. He is a member of both the Central Conference for American Rabbis, which is Reform, and the Rabbinical Assembly, which is Conservative. For the last 26 years, Kavod has been teaching classes, leading retreats, and counseling students in meditation, prayer, and creative forms of Jewish spirituality in the United States. Kavod joined Temple Beth El of South Orange County in 2011 to serve the synagogue's vision of progressive Judaism. He is husband to Alana Rogel Weider and the father of Levi, Aiden, and Aviv. Welcome, Rabbi Kavod.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I have to say that Rabbi Kavod is our temple's rabbi, and he is known for his smile and soul that lights up a room in your heart when he enters. We have a unique temple in that we have both the Reform congregation that was started in 1981 as well as the conservative congregation that joined us in 2010. Rabbi Kavod, can you tell us how that works today at our temple?
Well, first, before I get into that, I just want to say how grateful I am for the opportunity for this interview, Penny. So Temple Beth El of South Orange County it's one congregation, and what we are is one community with different worship opportunities. Some people like to pray with the more traditional liturgy, and so they might experience our conservative worship. And for some, they'd like something either more creative or that involves more musical instruments. And so there is the Reform option. But we are one community.
I did want to ask you one other unrelated question to our project before we get into this terrific project. Due to the severity of what's happening with anti-Semitism and incidents and even violence against Jews, what would you like to say about what's going on, and what would you like Jews and non-Jews to do about it?
Well, I think right now the question of hate is something that definitely transcends beyond the Jewish community of people for all different reasons. A lot of the times when people are feeling disenfranchised or they're struggling in their lives, there is the desire and the look to blame others for their problems and their issues. And those it's easy to project onto others who are different, all kinds of narratives that do not recognize the dignity and beauty of each person as a human being. So right now that is up not just among anti-Semitism with Jews, but as you mentioned earlier, Islamophobia for Muslims and for Asian Americans, and of course people with darker colored skin all the way across. And so much of the heart of it is ways that people have dehumanized the other, have made the other into an object all the way across. So I think what the solution is the more that we can build relationships with each other and be able to see each other as human beings and in the image of God, that's going to only happen through connecting. And there are a good number of there's people on both sides who are who are filled with a lot of extreme hate that might not be willing to come to the table. But I think there's a good number of Americans, and I would even venture to guess most of Americans are open and need to have those personal connections in order to combat some of the narratives of hate that that comes into our young people in our schools and all of that.
Thank you for your comments. And it's an unfortunate topic, but I felt it needed to be discussed. So let's talk about our 2022 annual Thanksgiving Interfaith Project, what it is, and why do you feel it's important for your congregation to participate in this experience?
I think there's, obviously there's two levels to the project. And one level is just being able to provide service to those in our county who are in need, being able to provide those Thanksgiving baskets, allowing people who are hungry to be able to eat. And that's just something I think as faith traditions that we are all committed to doing. The other element, though, that I think is a real highlight for all of our communities is the interfaith aspect of it. The fact that we are coming together with people who are different from us and who have different ways of worship and expressing themselves to be able to do this kind of wonderful project together. And I think, your last question, Penny, about anti-Semitism and about hate in general, that this is really the direction. The more that we all can come together and get to know each other as human beings, as having vital and vibrant religious traditions that have similar values that are connected to, the more that we actually are able to be there for each other and support each other when things happen in the world, in the community. And, I definitely, from the first time that I've met Tariq and John, it's very clear in all of us that there's this desire and love of God. And that is what connects us and brings us together and allows us to be able to relate immediately. And I think the more people feel that kind of commonality and experience through the Interfaith Thanksgiving event, the more that we're united.
Terrific. So can you please describe who we have here?
Well, the person with the microphone, Dyson Posey from Families Forward, and speaking about the service opportunity that we have. And then to the right of him is Pastor John Waterston, and from Shepherd of the Hills Methodist Church. And then, of course, to the left is Sheikh Tariq Atta of the Orange County Islamic Foundation. And I am on the very left there.
And I can say this is just me and Sheikh Tariq and Rabbi Kavod. And here, what are we looking at here?
There's a lot of all the volunteers from all three congregations did a whole food drive, and they had a specific list of foods that was needed for the baskets, and we all brought the food en masse. And then I think it's really mostly the folks at the Orange County Islamic Foundation really organized all of these tables with exactly, each table had all the foods that go into one Thanksgiving bag. And so organized a series of probably 7 tables or something like that with all the food. And each person who was there could take a bag and go through and put together. There was a list posted. It was all super organized. And there was a list posted that had all the foods that go in each basket, and people would fill them up and put the bags to the side.
And here we have volunteers, lots of volunteers from all three congregations. You want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, again, that's just that process of each person kind of going through each table and taking the foods that are necessary for each bag. So I think there's boxes of stuffing and cranberry sauce and all of that.
Here are the packed foods. This was so sweet. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been doing for a long time as part of this Interfaith Thanksgiving is we really want to engage young people. I think, all of our congregations really want our young people to have that experience of service from an early age and being a part of it. So they had a specific project, which was to make cards, Thanksgiving cards for the bags, which they could all sit around and do and be a part of helping it out. And, you can just imagine like a family, need for Thanksgiving, getting a big, a wonderful bag, and then having, a nice card drawn by a young person, or just saying thanks, happy Thanksgiving and wishing you blessings or something like that.
So cute. Thanks, Kavod. And now I'd like to introduce Sheikh Tariq Atta. Sheikh Tariq Atta was born and raised in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. During his childhood, he attended conventions and learned the basics of Islam through formal and non-formal means. Sheikh Tariq pursued his higher education at Northern Illinois University, where he attained a BA in psychology. After graduating from NIU, Sheikh Tariq went to Jordan in pursuit of Islamic knowledge. While in Jordan, Tariq studied at the World Islamic Science and Education University, also called the Islamic University, where he achieved a BA in Islamic jurisprudence and its foundations, as well as an MA in Islamic jurisprudence with a specialty in Islamic commerce and finance. Tariq now serves as the Imam of the Orange County Islamic Foundation and a board member of the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California. He's married and they have one child. Welcome, Sheikh Tariq. How long has OCIF been in existence?
The doors were officially opened in 1996.
And you started there in 2017?
That's correct.
Approximately how many families are in your congregation?
It's hard to give a precise estimate, but I would roughly estimate it around somewhere between 300 and 400.
Excuse my ignorance, but what's the difference between a sheikh and an imam?
Most often used interchangeably, but if you want to be more technical, an imam will refer to the individual who is responsible for leading prayers, whereas a sheikh would be the religious director or the religious leader where the community goes for religious rulings or guidance.
In your bio, it says that you have a BA in Islamic jurisprudence and its foundations, as well as a MA in Islamic jurisprudence with a specialty in Islamic commerce and finance. Can you explain what Islamic jurisprudence and Islamic commerce and finance are, as opposed to perhaps, like what we might get here, a business and finance degree?
Yeah, so when we talk about jurisprudence, it's more closely tied to what we'd call in the West law. So I'm able to provide and offer religious rulings from a legal sense. So people could come to me and ask, is this allowed in the faith or is this not allowed in the faith? And then just like law has various fields, one of those fields in Islamic law is what we'd call issues that revolve around money, commerce, trade, business contracts, banking, and the whole 9 yards there.
Is it common for mosques to be called Islamic foundations, or why is yours called that? Is that different from a mosque?
No, it's a mosque, right? It's the same thing. It's just an acronym that they chose for whatever reason.
Have you heard any interesting comments from your congregation about working with other faiths?
So we've been doing this for 20 years. The mosque has been engaging different religions for the past 20 years. And as far as my time at OCIF, I've never had someone come and complain and say, why are we doing this? In fact, our interfaith programs tend to have higher attendance from our congregation, especially when it's a project that involves charity work. So our Thanksgiving collaboration is probably one of the most attended programs of the mosque by its congregation.
When we spoke, you referenced 9/11 and how that seemed to impact the community as far as going out into the world more than being more within your own community. Can you talk about what impact that had?
Yeah, so before 9/11, the Muslim community was they were pretty much all immigrants. And here we have a new guest. They were all primarily an immigrant demographic, and naturally immigrants want to retain their culture and be around people who speak the same language and enjoy the same culture. So mosque facilitated that, and the Muslim community was very isolated. They stayed, this is our mosque, this is our area, we're just going to engage each other, and that's it. I mean, part of it is it's not anything against the broader population, but it's more an inability to, or a lack of knowledge on how to engage them, as notorious. However, with 9/11, we were put front and center stage, and the Muslim community in America quickly realized how poor of a strategy that was, and so immediately started to engage interfaith and to engage broader community, whether that's the local, state, or federal level, or just with other religious groups. And it's been working quite well for the past 20 years. I think everybody's happy with that decision, and we continue to enjoy and improve and build on that decision.
What are your goals for the project?
Thanksgiving project?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of the goals, the primary goal, is fulfilling a responsibility of a person of religion, and that is to help those in need. I mean, in all the Abrahamic faiths, charity and helping the one in need is a primary tenet. That, and of course, we have our community goals as well. We want people to get to know us. We want people to see us as reasonable individuals. People of religion are often portrayed and have traditionally been portrayed as unreasonable, irrational. They don't get along. So we want to counter that narrative and show them that, that's completely false.
It was an honor to be able to stay after our project and attend the prayers. What was your intention when you invite people to stay during your prayers?
Just to get people to get to know us, to let people to get to know us, what we do. Someone who observes the 5 daily prayers will very likely have to do one of those prayers somewhere in the public. Mm. So I often find myself having to pray next to my car in a parking lot. Mm. And for someone who doesn't know what prayer is, that looks quite bizarre. And you have very interesting stories of people saying like, oh, are you okay? Do you need medical attention? Mm. Or they think that the person's doing yoga. Mm-hmm. But we feel that the more we're able to show people what it is, the less bizarre it will seem when they see someone doing it. So our hope is to educate the broader community in terms of what we are doing. Plus, some people enjoy joining us. Mm-hmm. So we want people to feel welcome. We're not doing something exclusive and private and, you can't join us. So to continue to live that spirit of you are welcome in this mosque and that every section of the mosque is open to the public and you're more than welcome to join us.
Are the prayers the same or are they different depending on the time? Because there's 5 of them or 5 times.
All the prayers have the same positioning and action. The only difference is how many cycles is in each prayer and whether the prayer is done out loud or silently.
Are they pre-written or do you have an opportunity to do any personal prayers?
Predominantly pre-written. So we recite from our book. Obviously, the book isn't something you just make up. Mm-hmm. But you have the opportunity to invoke God in various parts of prayer, and which that can go back to you. You can make the prayers that are relevant to you.
Now, switching over to totally different subject, what do you think the current state of Islamophobia is going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, our times are quite concerning. It's worrisome. The direction of our country is not clear. Obviously, there are 2 extremes that I think broader America is trying to push back against. The latest midterm, I think, was a sigh of relief for a lot of people, showing that the broader American community wants stability, does not like the extreme voices on either side. I hope that analysis is true, but I think people of minority status or backgrounds are quite concerned with the direction of the nation. I do believe, like my dear Rabbi Kavod, that most Americans, if not the vast majority of Americans, are against any extremism or any anti-anything. But the onset of social media, it really does give a large platform to the extreme voices, and it actually rewards those extreme voices. Because in the algorithm of social media, the more common and the more views a video gets, the higher it's placed in the algorithm. And mm-hmm. when you have these individuals spewing out very controversial things, it does get the most views, right? It does get the most comments. And so this is what you see on social media. It's not a reflection of broader American society. When you look at social media and you see the terrain there, and then you go to anywhere here in America, it's two different fields, right? It's 2 different realities. But Islamophobia is still there. People do suffer from it and are targets of it. The most recent event, or most recent incident, I should say, at the national level was in South Florida, where a group of, I think, high school Muslims were praying, and a teacher in the school saw them and started to scream and shout over them and step on their fingers while they were in prostration. She was fired, which is very much welcomed, but it's still there.
Disgusting. Okay. On the opposite note, when I was talking to you before, I always think it's so cool when being part of a minority, and I grew up where I definitely was part of a minority. So you talked about that you grew up in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, and in Chicago, the different areas are more segregated. So, for instance, in Skokie is Jewish, and where you grew up, Southwest Chicago, is heavily Arab. And I just was wondering, what was that like growing up in a neighborhood where there are a lot of folks like you?
It was very convenient. One of the concerns that a lot of parents come to me with and the youth come to me with is that their child's in a high school or junior high, and there's only one or two other people who have a similar background. And so they feel isolated. It becomes difficult for them to build friendships, and they become easy targets for bullying. But in my experience in high school, because there was such a decent number of people of my same background, whether that's Muslim background or Arab background, because not all Arabs are Muslim. There's a lot of Arab Christians. So we were able to form a group together where it's, you mess with one of us, we mess with all of us. So that helped protect minorities from bullying and being easy targets. However, that's not the same here. Now, in my experience in Chicago, it wasn't that Arabs were the majority of any city, but there was a dense and clear population of them.
Right.
And that's just the nature of Chicago. I don't know the history why it's like that, but it just is like that.
Yeah. It always sounds neat. to be surrounded like that, like when I talk with people from Israel, and they just assume everyone's Jewish. I always wonder what that was like, so I like to ask. Thank you, Sheikh Tariq, and now we're gonna move over to Pastor Ron.
One other quick thing that I'd love to just add,
sure,
that I was thinking about when Tariq was speaking about the worship at the mosque, is one of the things that I find so moving and powerful and important in Muslim worship is the amount of bowing and prostration as a real physical expression of the acknowledgement of God, being something that's so much bigger and beyond all of us. And that's actually, one of our great rabbis, Moses Maimonides, his son, Abraham Maimonides, said, this is around 12th century, 11th century, that in Jewish tradition, we also did a lot of prostration. That was part of the prophetic Jewish tradition, but that it's been lost for many, many years after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and that really the Muslims have kept that tradition going, and that if we want to learn more about our own authentic ancient tradition, we should also turn and learn from Islam and how that worship happens. And that is always just such we think of our traditions as being these very separate things that are happening, and separate communities, separate everything. But we have influenced each other throughout history and deepened each other's relationship with God throughout history, and we continue to. And to just kind of remember that there's always something to learn from everybody is just one of the great pleasures for me about our interfaith connection.
Well, terrific. Well, thank you. Pastor John Watterson serves as site pastor for Rancho Santa Margarita. He's born in Cincinnati, Ohio. Pastor John's family moved to Southern California when he was 8 years old. He's the son of a United Methodist minister and has been a lifelong UMC member. He received his bachelor's degree from Westmont College and a master's of divinity from Claremont College of Theology. Pastor John's unique theological perspective embraces aspects of both evangelical Christianity and principles of social justice. Hiking is a great source of inspiration, along with reading, watching movies, and following his beloved Detroit Tigers. His wife is Cindy, and they have one son. Welcome, Pastor John.
Thank you.
How long has Shepherd of the Hills United Methodist Church been in existence?
Well, we exist on two sites. It's a one church with two sites, and the Mission Viejo site has been around for over 50 years. And the Rancho Santa Margarita site has been around 30 years. And I have served at the Rancho Santa Margarita site for about 7 years.
Your church is a Methodist church. How does that compare with other denominations of the Christian faith?
There are so many denominations of the Christian faith that it's hard to really draw a comparison. What I'll say is what stands out for me about the United Methodist tradition is that from our founding in the 18th century, we have stressed both kind of an evangelical love of God with an emphasis on social justice. So we have always seen those two things as parts of the same whole. A complete faith embraces both of those things. It doesn't just say, well, I'm into the soul stuff, or I'm in the justice stuff. In the Methodist tradition, and we seek to live into that every day, with varying degrees of success. But in the Methodist tradition, we seek to embrace both of those fully.
How has the annual Thanksgiving event changed over the years?
Well, it's changed dramatically, and then ironically, this last year we kind of have gone full circle, because
COVID, huh?
COVID, yeah. Every worshiping community puts their sort of stamp on it as hosting community. So that's similar. It's changed in the sense that, we went to a virtual food drives for a while because of COVID. We didn't get to, have that moment, like when we did it this year, and we met Dyson back at Families Forward and started bringing all these bags of food. We haven't done that for 3 years, because food was just being shipped to Families Forward as we purchased it online. So it's changed, but it's also kind of come back to its roots.
Have you heard any interesting comments from your congregation about working with the other faiths?
Oh, it's one of their favorite events of the year. They enjoy it immensely, and they especially enjoy it. The fellowship aspect, where we work side by side in bagging the things together, is always meaningful. But they also enjoy the opportunities to connect and even experience the different faith traditions. Like we had the prayer service at the mosque last time. And usually when we go to synagogue, Cantor Natalie leads us in some form of worship. And so they really appreciate that opportunity to just experience another way of walking with God.
Do they end up asking lots of questions of you?
Many questions, many that I cannot answer.
Yeah.
Because they're not my faith tradition. So sometimes I send them to Rabbi Kavod or to Tarek. Sometimes I can. They're basic enough to where I can answer them, but there's always questions, and some of them are like perception questions. For example, during the prayer service at the mosque, we're on our knees and we bow and we touch our forehead to the ground and come up again. And we've had several discussions about the meaning of that and what that's like for us. So it's not necessarily what is intended, but how do we experience that? We've had some wonderful talks about humility and bowing before the Lord. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So some of the questions have been technical questions about other faiths that I may or may not have the answer to, but many have been, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for them? What is it, And so the questions have really been all over the place.
Why do you think it's important for your congregation to participate in the interfaith Thanksgiving event or any interfaith interactions?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think it's important because the world is bigger than our perspective. And it's just important to see the largeness, I guess, of what's going on, the vastness of what's going on besides what we do. I've said before, and I think I probably mentioned it to you in the past, that when I attend these events and I see the faithfulness of my Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters, I become a better Christian. I don't lose anything by embracing others. My own path is enhanced. And that's one of those just divine paradoxes that, those divine mysteries that, I choose just to live with rather than try and, figure out. So I think it's important because it's important, to broaden our perspective of the world, but it's also important because somehow in doing that, we, become more faithfully connected to our own tradition as well.
Both Rabbi Kavod and Sheikh Tariq, I asked them about the climate now with anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And as a Christian pastor, I'd like to hear what are you thinking when you hear about this increased incidence of hate?
Unfortunately, I'm sure my experience is different than both Kavod and Tariq because oftentimes their communities are the victims of these things, and my community is oftentimes the perpetrator of these things. Not in my particular church,
right?
But many of the people who are anti-Semitic and Islamophobic, sadly, claim the Christian faith, and so my response is I'm saddened when these things happen because they're happening, just because they're happening, and it's cruel and it's unjust and it's there's just nothing good about it. So I'm sad just for the thing itself, but I'm also sad because that becomes the image that people have of the faith that I practice. And that has nothing to do with the faith that I practice. It's like, to use an extreme example, it's like when Tariq would say to me that what 9/11 terrorists do is not Islam. That I don't know what religion they practice, but it's not Islam. And I would say the same thing about these so-called Christians who are Islamophobic and anti-Semitic. I would say I don't know what faith they practice, but it's not a Christianity that I recognize. But if I don't stand up as a Christian minister and say something, it becomes what people think Christianity represents. And so I do feel a responsibility, to stand with my brothers and sisters who are Islam, or who are Muslim, who are Jewish. I do feel that responsibility to say, I will stand with you if you want, but I also feel a responsibility to be the voice of my faith and say, this is not us. I don't know what they are, but they're not us. So like I said, sadly, I have a different experience of these things than the two of those gentlemen.
So when and why did you decide to become a pastor?
That's me becoming a pastor was a long time battle. I was Jacob and the angel. I wrestled and wrestled and wrestled, and until the angel just sort of said no, poop, and they broke me, and I I surrendered. But I started seminary in I think it was 1986. I quit seminary twice, dropped out of the ordination process twice, And then the third time I went back in 1999 and graduated in 2002 and got ordained that same year. And so it's been something I wrestle with most of my life, quite honestly. I remember at 11 years old, feeling this call and said, no, I have other plans. And I was wrong, apparently.
So what were you're dropping out because of why? Something else was pulling you? What caused you to drop out twice?
uh it's a great question. I couldn't I couldn't give my whole self to it. You mentioned in the introduction, my dad was a pastor.
Hmm.
So I have the advantage and the disadvantage of having really no illusions about ministry. When I got ordained, it wasn't like I thought, okay, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And and I'm going to do it differently than everybody's ever done it before. And it's going to be great. I didn't have any of those illusions. I grew up knowing that people were going to call me up in the middle of the night. I grew up knowing people are going to be mad at me for things that I say. And they're going to take things that I say personally. They shouldn't take personally. Um,
You don't have to be a pastor for all that.
no, I know, but the difference between a pastor and say, because one of the jobs that I had when I left after the second time in seminary was I worked in the insurance business. I handled claims for State Farm, and then I was also part of the special investigations unit for Liberty Mutual. And in that occupation, I didn't have to say anything meaningful. All of my language was about, what I'm doing. And so, yes, if I made someone angry, if I said, "Oh, your claim is denied," but it wasn't like everything that I said was so fraught with meaning that, I stand up on Sunday morning and try and tell people, thus saith the Lord. And it's about your life, by the way.
Mhm.
And if I make somebody uncomfortable, then they're gonna, they don't want to live contrary to God's will, but they don't always want me to point out that they're living contrary to God's will. Or that I should say, not they, we are living contrary to God's will. And so, it's there's that challenge. And I always say that, in a congregation, we have, between live and virtual, we probably have about 80 to 90 people worship on a week. That many people, if I haven't offended somebody every week, I'm not trying hard enough. And I don't mean I'm not trying to offend anybody, because I never want to offend anyone, but it means I'm not trying hard enough to get into the truth of what our tradition says. And so I think that was really what, for me, it's like I can't give myself to this to the degree that I know I must. And finally, the third time, it was I can't do anything else. I can't. My life doesn't work doing anything else. And so I was able to kind of make that transition and give myself all to it. And it's been a wonderful, 20 some odd years. I mean, I've really, I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that I finally, surrendered.
Well, that's good that your story has a happy ending. Now we'll get into the details of the organization, where the proceeds and food went to from for the 2022 annual Interfaith Thanksgiving Project. Families Forward is an Irvine, California-based nonprofit organization founded in 1984 by a group of community members in collaboration with the City of Irvine and the Irvine Company, with the goal of providing affordable housing for homeless and at-risk families. The agency began with only 5 apartment units and 1 part-time counselor. Families Forward has grown and now has housing units across Orange County, a food pantry providing food for nearly 7,000 people per year, and offers services to prevent homelessness in Orange County, California. Families Forward's mission is to help families in need achieve and maintain self-sufficiency through housing, counseling, education, and other support services. The organization has over 200 volunteers in addition to full-time and part-time employees. Families Forward has been awarded various awards and honors, including 4 stars by the nonprofit evaluator Charity Navigator for fiscal responsibility for the last 7 years, placing them in the top 3% of rated charities nationwide, noting that 90% of donations are spent on its programs and services. The representative from Families Forward is Dyson Posey, who is the Community Engagement Specialist. After years collaborating with others in the theater and film industry, like so many, the pandemic signaled a need for change and sparked a long-standing desire to dive headfirst into harnessing that background in direct service of vulnerable families in Orange County. This passion steered him to Families Forward, where he served for a year as the executive assistant to the CEO before pivoting into community engagement with the organization's key community partners. Welcome, Dyson.
Hello, Penny. What a privilege to be with you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for coming. What types of services does Families Forward provide?
Well, you mentioned some of the key ones that we are most proud of. Our pantry, our food pantry, is entirely volunteer managed, and that's open 4 days a week, and it's there for anybody in Orange County who's hungry. So we welcome folks to come once a week and pick up some proceeds, and then on top of that, our key mission, the thing that we really emphasize, is affordable housing, and specifically for families with minor-age children. That's a real point of focus, a place of emphasis for us. And so with that, we, in partnership with cities, in partnership with private housing providers, and everybody in between, we help try to facilitate affordable, accessible housing for families with those kids. And part of that is not just the provision of housing, but also bringing to bear all services families may need, whether it's mental health counseling, whether it's job counseling. We really want to bring sort of a team approach, a full circle approach. We bring all of our folks to each family to say, look, whatever we need to do, whatever we need to sort out here, we're going to walk with you hand in hand to get to more stable footing, to get to a better place. And that's, very, very high level overview of what we do. But those are some of the things that we bring to bear.
Terrific. I wanted to share a clip of Families Forward.
A home is more than just a place. It's a feeling. Security, strength, pride. It's both a sanctuary after a long day and a launch pad into the next. But what if that disappeared? For many families, homelessness is just one paycheck away. So what if your home, along with all its comforts, was suddenly gone? What next? Since 1984, Families Forward has helped thousands of Orange County families find stable, secure housing while providing essential services every step of the way. For some, our food pantry is vital to success. For others, counseling through our mental health program is the necessary first step. Though each family's story is unique, the outcome remains the same. They're no longer experiencing homelessness. Every day, success stories play out under the care of Families Forward, but none of it is possible without our generous donor and volunteer network. Let's continue giving families all the resources they need to cook in their own kitchens. to keep a roof over their kids' heads, to kiss them goodnight in warm beds. Families experiencing homelessness in Orange County turn to us for help, for hope, and ultimately, for a home. And we never turn them away. Families forward, until every family has a home.
Did you want to say anything about that, Dyson, before we move on?
Absolutely. I mean, it's I think that video. How do I follow it? I think it really speaks to the heart of the organization. It speaks to what we're doing. And lest I forget, I know we're going to dive into this, but the other big piece of what we do is, of course, our seasonal programs. And we'll dive into that and how important the Interfaith Coalition has been for one of those programs in particular for us. But yes, that video I think was something we did in the last couple of years. It's actually featured the folks in there are real former clients, folks who came to us for services. Nick has taken some of those resources and just springboard. He's just jumped. And he's running with it. He's running his own business now. And they were very, very gracious and said, we'll come back and help you all put together this video. So that's one of my favorite things about that, is that it's something that I think speaks to what we're doing and is meant to reach folks and engage folks. And there's truth in it every step of the way, right up to and including the folks featured there are folks who have come through the organization and received services and have remained a part of the coalition here through and beyond that time of need. So we're so grateful to Nick and his family, and grateful to be doing the work that we're doing in the community.
Terrific. One thing before we go any further, I wanted to be sure that I said was that in Orange County, if you dial 211, a 3-digit number, you can get in touch with help, or you can go to 211oc.org, which is a hotline for crisis, and get help. So I wanted to be sure that we talked about that, because I think it's an essential and unique contact to know about.
Absolutely. And the cool thing, one of our program team members actually was showing me this and talking about it yesterday, and it was terrific. On 211.org, you can get even more specific about what it is that your needs might be in that moment. But it's a really good resource to connect folks to, to resources that they may need.
Where do you get your volunteers from?
Our volunteers are folks from all over the community, all over Orange County. I mean, we have a core group here that's many of whom have been volunteering with the organization for a very long time. A lot of it started in Irvine. I think that's really that's where the organization started, and of course we've grown. So we have a lot of our base is here in Irvine, and then some of the surrounding cities right around us. That said, a big part of our mission moving forward is to actually expand those capacities, expand that dialogue, and try to find ways to bring more folks into the organization. That's a huge part of what I'm doing, is finding those opportunities and going out. Because we say very lovingly to our core group, we'll never let you go. And we want to make sure that we have those volunteer opportunities for new folks who are unfamiliar with the organization. We're eager to hear from them and bring them into the fold.
I know that at our Interfaith event, the goal was 240 families for Thanksgiving, but you ended up, I believe, with over 900 families being served. Where did you get the extra help from?
Yeah, ultimately the number I think was around 984, and
Cool.
before maybe we'll get to this section in a bit, but that 250 or so from the Interfaith group came at a critical time. I mean, that's right towards the end of our distribution, where it's the cavalry coming in. We couldn't be more thankful for that, because I think it was clearly, just look at those numbers. It's a huge part of how we're able to reach almost 1,000 families. The other proceeds, the food drive proceeds, are from community partners of all different shapes and sizes. So that's a big part of what I'm doing too, is reaching out to folks and setting up food drives, whether it's a community organization within a school or it's the school itself, churches, businesses. We really do everything we can to, if folks are wanting to do something for their neighbors during the holidays, we want to be that partner with those folks to get that food drive going, get that toy drive going, and help do that. And so beyond the Interfaith group, that's where that stuff came in through the tireless work of our volunteers and staff, going out there, getting those proceeds, getting it all back into the office, and then getting it organized so that we could get it out to families as efficiently as possible. It's a whole machine here, and it takes a little getting used to. But when you have that moment to kind of sit back and look at it on the macro, kind of, it's really something. And we couldn't do it without the folks who work internally, and we certainly couldn't do it without our friends in the community who want to do something for their neighbors, for the folks down the street, and that means the world to us.
Yeah, I've already mentioned that it takes at minimum wage 131 hours per week to afford a 2-bedroom house here. I mean, an apartment here. Let's see, if the people usually work 40 hours a week, I mean, the numbers just don't work out. And so, and plus the number of housing availability period doesn't work out. Can you talk a bit about all that?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. I mean, I think, one of the things we do with our on our housing side is we have a whole team of folks who specialize in going out there, working with those housing provider partners and figuring out, saying, look, folks, we've got various programs that are supported at different levels, whether it's the state or the government or even the city, to help folks maintain housing. And we go out there and reach out to folks and say, look, not only are these programs available and something that we'd love to have you partner with us with, we're going to be here every step of the way to make sure that there's a terrific dynamic. I think we care about our housing providers, and we want to look out for our housing providers every bit as much as we want to look out for the folks who come in through services. And so that's a big piece. The challenge we ran into last year was that inventory for rental inventory, just the amount of units that were available to rent by anybody, plunged almost down to 1%. And when you have that little availability, it gets really tough. So what I'd say is just applaud, I'd applaud to that team, because they stay diligent, they stay at it, they're hitting the pavement, and they're talking to folks and trying to figure out solutions for families. And we're working at that every day. And no doubt about it, when your inventory is that low, that's a challenge. And not just for us, it's a challenge for other organizations doing similar work. It's a challenge for folks in the private market just trying to move around. That's certainly something that affects all of us.
So often, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, that, people have in their minds homeless people being, maybe the mentally ill under the freeway kind of thing. But what are really the demographics of so many of people who are facing these challenges?
Well, there's all. I'm not an expert per se on all of those categories. I do know that the folks that we're working with are families with young kids. They're people who are working full time, as we've touched on. They're people who want to do well, who want to be self-sufficient, and I think, as the case with many of us, certainly the case with me, the last thing I want to do is ask for help, and. Now, that's not always necessarily a healthy thing. Maybe we should all do a little introspection about that piece. But I know that the families that we work with are folks who have the right intentions, who, for the, some may need some mental health counseling, some may need some employment counseling, some resources, some things to help them strengthen up and make sure that they're in the best position to get where they want to go. But every single one of those folks are folks who care about their families, who want to do well in society, who want to thrive, who want to grow and want to thrive. And unfortunately, sometimes it can come down to these trade-offs that I think many of us take for granted and that others are confronted with every day. Am I able to get the kids to school on time, or am I going to get to work on time? Are we going to have a hot meal tonight, and can we have the heater on? What's that going to look like? And I think when you get a little bit closer and start to look at some of those trade-offs, and by the way, folks who are working 40 hours a week, right, and really doing their best, but when you're confronted with some of those trade-offs, and you're in a position where you can't do both, or you can't do everything all at once, that's a real challenge. And I think that's really a key part of what we're doing and why we're here, is to try to be somebody who says, you know what, don't do all those things at once. We want to help you. We want to make sure that you get where you want to go.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, folks who have, mental health issues and are intense under the freeway kind of thing, they need help too. I don't mean to say that they don't, but I don't think, there's such a huge percentage of our kids going to school in Orange County schools who are hungry, and we just don't know it. It's there. I don't know if you have the percentage, but 14.2% of Orange County's children are living in poverty, and that's, you just don't know who, our kids, in their math classes is actually can't concentrate on their math because their stomach's growling. It's just really sad.
Well, and I do in Orange County, 48%, so almost half of kids in schools are either eligible for or are accessing and utilizing some level of assisted lunch programs. So just another metric that I think underscores your point. And thank goodness for those programs, and thank goodness for pantries and all of the community resources going in to try to address that issue. And it continues to be an issue and something we want to take very seriously. Certainly for our kids, this is tomorrow, right? And so we need to make sure that's not an issue, and we'll do everything we can here at Families Forward. And I think others are working very, very hard to try to address that issue as well.
Yeah. Whenever I think of what's it like for a kid who's living in their family's car, it's just horrible. So getting back to our Thanksgiving project, have you heard any interesting stories about any of the families who've been helped over the years?
Well, I think, the one thing that always strikes me, and I've, been hearing this throughout our holiday program, is we hear more and more these days from folks who at one point or another came to us in a challenging situation, seeking resources, and are now circling back to give back to their communities and to continue that work and to give instead of receive. And so those stories always impress me. And the others that, of course, move me deeply are when every once in a while we'll be out doing community events. We'll be doing a food drive or a diaper drive, and somebody will stop their vehicle and we'll spring up. We'll be ready for a donation, and they'll say, hey, I actually just wanted to stop by to let y'all know that right now or a month ago or what have you, Families Forward was able to match me up with some housing that got my family stabilized for the last few months. And so that those are always stories that warm my heart too. People get very emotional. It makes me emotional just sort of thinking about it and talking about it. But I think that's just something in general, generally speaking, that I think is really something. Is one, the folks out there who we've been able to reach, that impact is meaningful and that they can feel that. And then on top of that, further down the line, when we have folks circle back and say, listen, I'm in a better place because I was able to access resources at Families Forward. And so now I want to give something back and follow it up in kind. And those are the stories that remind me just how important this work is, and that make me grateful that I'm somebody who gets to do it, because it's really something. There's a lot of challenges out there, but people are resolute, they're determined, and they want to do good, whether it's for themselves, for their families, or for others. And that's really something that, it always strikes me, always.
I'd like to talk about some of your successes in 2021, some of your stats of like how many families you helped and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. We were able to do all kinds of things. We run these seasonal programs that are a huge part of that, and so that starts in the fall with our back to school program. And so in that case, we were able to cook up a backpack and school supplies for over 970 children. And then in some of our food pantry served over 48,000 meals last year. And I think that's for one pickup, you'll get maybe 1 or 2 meals. So those are folks coming by once a week and picking up those proceeds. And on top of that, we've done some great career coaching, helping 120 parents sort of find ways to leverage their background and their skills and what they're coming to the table with in order to upgrade their employment. We've got a whole list of things. And the one that I think I can't go without is last year looks like we did 835 Thanksgiving baskets. This year, over that 980 number. I mean, that and large part in thanks to the Interfaith Coalition and the sense of community coming from everybody involved in that program is just spectacular, really spectacular.
Terrific. I read in the statistics that you received over 2,100 requests from families experiencing housing crisis. I mean, given the low number of houses, I just can't even imagine, receiving those calls and knowing what in the world to do with them.
Well, and like so many organizations, we've had our capacity challenges, and we do everything we can to make sure that everybody who calls us gets a call back. And sometimes, and this is the other side of it that breaks your heart, is sometimes folks do have to wait for a little bit, but we really work diligently, and our team keeps going to try and make sure. I mean, particularly during the pandemic, it's not been an easy time for folks, and we work really hard to make sure that everybody who reaches out to us hears back from us. That's very important.
Yeah, the statistics say it went up 4 times normal, and the statistics of what it usually is horrific. So just horrible. But on another positive note, the stats say that 99% of your families remain stable, housed after a year. So that's terrific. You have quite an impact on these families that keep them stable.
Yeah, and I think we attribute a lot of that to our care team approach, which means that we don't just ask folks to tell us what they need and then divvy out that little section of it. We bring everybody to the table for every family, and that's been a real successful approach for us. We are a housing first organization, so we believe that folks need to have stable housing before we can ask them to do any number of other things to take those steps towards self-sufficiency. So we work in that space, and we bring the whole team. And so whatever your needs are, if they're the same today and tomorrow, or if they change tomorrow, we want to make sure that the families who work with us can access those resources. It's been something that I think is helpful. It makes that success rate possible, and it's also allowed us to shorten the amount of time that folks need to stay in affordable, accessible housing units. They've been able to kind of restart and move on and get right out of the program in a shorter amount of time because of that team approach to what we're doing, in my view.
Well, terrific. Well, thank you, Dyson, for what Families Forward does to help all of these struggling families. If anyone wants to donate to Families Forward, please go to their website at www.families-forward.org/donate and give what you can, because it's a terrific organization. Thanks to everyone else also, Dyson, Pastor John, Sheikh Tariq, Rabbi Kavod, for your time today and for being on this episode. We really appreciate your work you do every day to improve relationships between the faiths and help those in need. Well, this is the last episode of Peace with Penny for the year. Thanks so much to all of our listeners and those who do the work to make peace possible between Israelis and Palestinians and anyone in the world, including within yourselves. It's been a gratifying year, and I'm looking forward to 2023, which is sure to be a year filled with more interviews with people working hard every day on peace. Not only will we be speaking with grassroots Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers and interfaith collaborators, but we'll continue our discussions on the various Federation peace plans that people have been discussing. Be sure to listen to the interviews and vote in the poll for what makes the most sense to you. We'll add choices of plans as the interviews appear. We hope you'll enjoy special times with your family and friends and take some time to put a smile on the faces of others less fortunate. For us, we'd really appreciate it if you'd share our interviews with your family and friends and like our Facebook pages. You know how that goes nowadays. Please help us get the word out and let others know that many people work on peace from all directions. The majority of Israelis and Palestinians want peace, and many work toward that end every day. At Peace with Penny, we hope you all have a happy and healthy holiday season. And for now, as always, we hope that someday everyone will live in peace, shalom, and salam.